They don't think I'd make it to the other hospital. It was that bad.
In a moment, life can flip. For Abbas Jamie, it took a brush with death to rewrite his story. Imagine trading a skyline of skyscrapers for the endless horizon of the sea.
15 months after the heart attack, boarded a plane with one bag containing everything that I owned to move to an island that I've never visited before.
It's a tale not just for survival, but of rebirth. And within his story, Abbas Jamie packs a lifetime of lessons on letting go, living fully, and designing a future that resonates with the true essence of who we are.
We live our lives in two halves. The first half, we build this vessel of life. And then the second half, we fill this vessel with meaningful things.
Abbas, last year you literally boarded a plane with one bag with everything that you had and moved to a tropical island in Indonesia. How this came to be?
Yeah, I have to take a few steps back. I suppose I was living corporate life. I have been in corporate for many years and then working for myself, strategic advisor to government and academia. And that was cool. And then lockdown, COVID came and I was extremely busy, right? And then in February 2021, something really unexpected happened. I suffered a severe heart attack. And people who know me in my group of friends, I'm the last person that people expected to have a heart attack because I don't look like a typical heart attack potential. But, at the end of the day, I think it's a combination of all these things that were happening at the time. COVID, people dying around us, just a lot of work as well. And so it was quite a shock to the system. So I took a walk the early morning, came home, and I just started getting this pains across my chest. My wife came out and I felt something was definitely not right. Still got to call one of my colleagues. I was supposed to have a workshop the morning. Then doctor said, just get me to hospital. So she rushed me to the hospital, which was about 5 minutes away, into the ER. She couldn't come in because it's locked down. So I'm alone in the ward, and I could just sense the tension in the room. At that stage, I didn't know I was having a heart attack, right? But they don't have a cardiac unit at this hospital. They need to get me to another hospital, which is about 15 minutes away. They don't think I'd make it to the other hospital. It was that bad. And so they decided to give me this drug called a clot buster, which basically turns your blood into water. So it's quite dangerous. And so they give me this clot buster, and that sort of subsides the pain, and I managed to stabilize. And so they said they're not going to rush to get the ambulance. I'm just relax in the ER. Ambulance can fetch me later on in the afternoon. And so I laid in the ER unit alone from about 8 o'clock in the morning till about 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was time for deep reflection, a deep reflection on your life, the things you're doing, the things you're chasing, the plans you have. And I quickly realized there's not an arm or leg that you lose. If this thing goes, that's it, lights out, game over. All the plans you had, gone. And I made up my mind laying there, I was going to change my life. And I knew it wasn't going to be an incremental change. It was going to be something substantial. And so after I went to the other hospital, they had 3 blockages and they put in a stent the next day. And within a few days, I was discharged from the hospital. Got home, couldn't have visitors because it was locked down, and started speaking to the family, to the wife about what are we going to do. Looked at options in South Africa. That's where we were staying. And then my wife said, we've all been saying, let's look at overseas. And started doing research on places that people can stay. A lot of the nomads end up in Bali. We've been to Bali. It just was too much tourists, too much traffic for us. We started looking around. And then my wife actually discovered this island called Lombok, right next door to Bali. Started doing the research on Lombok. And like you said, and I did all the things that people say don't do. Don't relocate to a place that you've never been to. Don't rent a house that you've not seen. But we moved. And we've been here over a year, and it's been a fantastic experience, a wonderful journey. And before we moved, there were a lot of obstacles along the way, but I had a plan of what this new desired future looked like. And so for me, it was I needed to get on that plane and move here. And so that's how I ended up in Lombok, a very different life to my previous corporate life. And for me, it's just this journey of reconnecting to nature, to spirituality and serenity. And so that's the journey I'm on right now, trying to pursue simpler living on this island called Lombok.
Wow, that was quite a journey. And how strange is life that we need to arrive at a point where we almost lose everything in order to change something. And there wasn't any signs that this scary moment will arrive in terms of stress. Apart from the COVID and the workload and so on, you never had a thought that you want to end that lifestyle and start something that is much more in tune with what you really want?
For me, it wasn't this thing of the job that I was in. I really loved my work. It was fantastic work. I was working with senior executives in these large organizations, helping to embed futures thinking into the organization. And so I was not unhappy with my work. My work was very fulfilling. But at the same time, I was kidding myself, right? Because you tell yourself you're living a balanced life. I never brought work home, never worked weekends. The pressure in these large organizations, when you're part of it, you experience it, the deadlines and all of those, the politics that goes on in those organizations. And that's been my life for a very long time. What's interesting, I read a book after this incident on this journey that I was on, written by Richard Rohr. It's called Falling Upwards. And he's a priest. And he says we live our lives in two halves. The first half, we build this vessel of life. And then the second half, we fill this vessel with meaningful things. But then he goes further and he says, you can't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to move my life from building this vessel to filling the vessel. You actually need to fall. The fall, you look forward and you see this future life very differently. And that's exactly what happened to me. If I had the heart attack in February 2021, if you had to ask me in January 2021, would you be staying on a tropical island out of, what are you talking about? I just like, oh, what are you talking about? But that day, laying in the ER unit and looking into my life and the life I was living, that second half of my life just looked very different. And so I experienced that falling upward moment, and the life that I wanted to move towards, I just couldn't do it in the place where I was staying, the lifestyle I was living, the cars, the house, everything that goes with that lifestyle. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that lifestyle. But I think once I got to this point of looking at what I wanted my future to be, it didn't align with that lifestyle anymore.
Yeah, I bet, because we often need to make this huge change in our life in order to escape that past life. And as you mentioned, in your case, was a really life-changing moment. And I wonder how your family react when you mentioned to them, I want to change this. I want to follow a more simple life. I want to move to a tropical island. What were their reaction and how everything unfolded? Because it was a bit of time to plan that change.
Yeah. And again, this is what I've been helping people with, because when you stand at that precipice and you're looking into the future, it just seems so overwhelming. And so just saying, sell everything you own and move to a place that you've never stayed in before, it seems overwhelming. There's all these things that come into your mind. And so what I've been doing in my previous life for senior executives was this concept of embedding futures into the organization. And so when you embed futures, you have a very clear vision of what the future looks like, but then you break it down, and you break it down into the steps, not only the steps you need to take, but what you need to focus on in order to achieve that desired future. No one can predict the future. But if you do your own research, you come up with certain scenarios and you look at these potential scenarios, and then you say, which scenario do you want to be part of? And once you've decided that, then you say, okay, what are the things I need to do to achieve that? And so that's the process I took my family through as well, which is basically the same process that I've taken lots of clients through. And I've had great success with it. And so when people started reaching out to me, friends who heard that I moved, it was like, what the hell? I've always been involved in corporate, in big stuff, launching big events and stuff. So people were like, how did this happen? You start speaking to people about the personal journey that you're on. And it became apparent to me quite quickly that actually many people that want to take this step and just don't know where to start. And so I started helping people, just speaking to them, taking them through the process that I followed. And I've had a number of people that have already come to visit me here. I've got someone coming early next year for 6 months. From just helping people, it turned into this thing of, okay, this is potentially something that I can do. And so I basically reinvented myself on LinkedIn. And previously I had the whole corporate profile on LinkedIn, and that has changed to this new offering of mine of helping people move from this life of deadlines to a life of purpose, escape the rat race, whatever you want to call it. But it is for people who are looking for something different to where they're at.
What's the first step in achieving that? We always dream about a life that aligns with our purpose or goals. And in a sense, it's still a deadline. It's still something that you want to achieve. But how you frame that in a way and how you make the process easier in order to accomplish that without the overwhelm of everything that fits into that?
So firstly, it is about embracing this futures mindset. So I've got a qualification in future studies, which complements my engineering qualification. So my career was around the business of engineering. So I always held senior positions in engineering companies, involved with commercial deals, done a managed large US constructor. So involved in the business of engineering. But then I complemented it with this futures studies qualification. And these two complement each other so well. And in future studies, like I said, you can't predict the future, but you can be part of creating a different future. And so when I deal with organizations, when I deal with people, I say, we have this futures dilemma. in that we're making decisions in the present, and it's normally based on data from the past. So if you've been in part of large organizations and you set in your budget for next year, you look at what did you achieve last year? And then you say, how bullish are we feeling? Is it 5% or 10%? That becomes our target for next year. And then you work backwards and you say, if that's the budget for next year, how many people can achieve that budget and how much work do I need to keep that people busy? So that's how most organizations do it. And so when you do that, you're not creating a different future. All you're doing is you're taking the past and you're extending the past into the future. And so large organizations really struggle with this concept of innovation and doing things dramatically different because the organization has this immune system that protects the way things are done. But then interestingly, we do that in our personal lives as well. We look back and we say, what has worked before? And we look at people that have done things and we say, oh, that's worked. Let me try that same thing. And the world is changing so rapidly, all of these things, AI and et cetera, that things that worked 10 years ago, it's just not going to work 10 years into the future. It's just not. It's going to dramatically change. And so what I tell people when I deal with individuals and with senior execs, I use this 50, 30, 20 rule and say 50% of your time must be focused on getting your things done, the stuff that you need to get out of the door, right? 30% is on your 12-month target and 20% of your time on the distant future. I'm talking 10, 15 years. Most senior people, when I tell them that, they say, yeah, that sounds reasonable. As a senior person, I should be doing that. And I say, okay, cool. Do you realize 20% of your time is 4 days a month? And then they shock, right? Because very few of them are spending 4 days a month thinking about the distant future. And the reason they're not doing it is because no one's getting measured on the 10, 15-year future. You're getting measured on the 12-month future. And so that's where your focus is. And so in your personal life, it's not 20 days a month, it's 30 days a month in your personal life. So you should be 6 days a month thinking about your personal future. If you're not doing that, I can guarantee you will end up in some other future, some undesirable future sometimes, in someone else's future. And so if you want this new future, you need to start thinking deeply about the future, spending time in the future. And that's the tools that I introduce people to. And so it's not a once-off process. It's about getting people to start embracing this concept of futures, becoming comfortable with uncertainty, becoming comfortable with disruption. Because we all know life is not linear. We know things are messy. But yet we are always surprised when things don't go according to plan. We're like, why is things going according to plan, right? We know that life just does not work in a straight line. And so that's the first thing I do with people. It is about saying you need to embrace this futures mindset. And future studies is a whole field that you study. And so the coaching program that I work with is based on futures tools and business strategy tools. And I put these together and put together this roadmap that I help people with.
Since life is not linear, as you mentioned, it's always so hard to predict or assume what will happen in the future. How can you focus in the present moment on things that will influence that future of ourselves? For me, sometimes I know that I can do some things now to influence that, but something behind my ear is always telling me, man, you should focus on this thing right now. Doesn't matter how that will influence. If it's important now, do it now. So I try to understand from the perspective of someone that is going through the same process. Like, how do you think in a way and on what things you focus in the present moment to influence that future state? A part of the mindset that you need to work on and to actually schedule time probably in your calendar to focus those 6 days a month on thinking about the future. How your thought process works in that situation.
So that brings me to my roadmap. I think without a roadmap, it just becomes overwhelming. Right, because it's just so big. And like I say, you got all these deadlines that you need to meet immediately. And so my roadmap starts with this thing called a massive transformative purpose, or MTP. So the MTP comes from Singularity University in the States, and they work with organizations that are embarking on exponential growth. So they're not incremental, they want exponential growth. And when they start this strategy journey with these organizations, it starts with the MTP, a massive transformative purpose. This MTP sits above your vision and mission statement. It's bigger than the organization, right? That becomes your North Star. It's the thing that when you have a tough decision to make, and those tough decisions are normally political, financial, you ask yourself, is this thing going to contribute towards my MTP or not? If it's not going to contribute, I don't do it, right? And so I've taken that concept of this MTP and brought it down to an individual and say, as an individual, you need to come up with your MTP. And so there's an exercise I take people through so that they can come up with the MTP, either as an individual or as a couple. And once they have that MTP, you get them to actually draw the MTP, right? And drawing is something like people haven't done in sometimes decades. But it is about unlocking that creativity, that 4-year-old in us that was always inquisitive, because you need to start doing that as part of this process, of this journey of creating something new. You need to unlock that creativity. And so I get people to write out a very short, brief statement of what their MTP is, and then they draw it. And so then you got this thing, you put it up on the fridge. And then very importantly, to your question, you say, okay, so if that is my desired future, what are the things that can potentially disrupt my MTP? And so in order to prepare yourself better, because there's going to be disruption, life is not linear, there's going to be disruption. And then you say, okay, so if these are the things that can potentially disrupt my future, you identify 4 or 5 of them. And then you start doing deep research on that topics. And when I say deep research, at least 50 hours. That's 50 hours of reading, watching a YouTube from a specialist in that area, and then you start getting this deep knowledge in that area. So, give you an example, AI. Everyone has an opinion on AI. Everyone. You can ask someone, they will have an opinion on it, right? And most of it is based on their interaction with ChatGPT or Midjourney. How many people have actually done research on AI? Right? Deep research. And so when you talk to people about AI, how is this going to disrupt? Everyone, it's going to disrupt us because kids are going to be able to do their assignments using ChatGPT, and that's not the disruption, right? And so AI is one of the areas that I've done deep research on. I don't need to be a specialist on it, but I need to have done my own research to have my own opinion on it. And so one of the guys that I follow on AI is Mo Goddard, who is the former Google executive in charge of AI. He had his own falling upward moment when his son died, right? And he's now on this mission of spreading happiness. And he speaks about AI, and he says that, understand ChatGPT probably has an IQ of about 155 at the moment. Einstein's IQ was 160. He says at the rate it's going, we're not talking years, we're talking months. That's going to 10 times. So we're looking at AI having an IQ of 1,500 in months, not years. So he says, can you imagine in the early 70s, Einstein at the IQ of 160 speaking to the dumbest person on earth, trying to explain the theory of relativity? The person doesn't know what he's talking about, just no idea. And that differential of 160 to, let's say, 120 is 40. So now you have an intelligence IQ of 1,500 speaking to us normal human beings, 140 intelligence. We're not going to know what these things are talking about. We're really not going to understand what they're talking about. That's the disruption. And so when you start doing these research, I now have a vision of the future. There's been a lot of talk about metaverse. I believe there's going to be a metaverse, but it's not going to be built by humans. Right? AIs will build a metaverse, and they will maybe let us into that metaverse to come and see. We're not going to understand what's going on in this space. So once an intelligence with an IQ of 1,500 embeds itself into society, when I say embed itself into society, I'm talking about the pillars of society, right? Whether that's politics, whether it's finance, whatever it is, you can't get rid of it. If we look at social media, it's embedded itself into society. Can you imagine an elections being running now without social media? It's not going to happen. Same with AI. So I've gone deep into this AI discussion, but that just gives you an idea of once you start doing the deep research in something, you then have an understanding, probably 80-90% than general population. And why is that important? If you do your deep research on 4 or 5 stuff, you then start connecting dots in ways which other people can't. And once you can connect those dots in ways which other people can't, you can then create a desired future which other people just don't see. I'll give you an example. I had the traditional worldview of investments and retirement. I would not be sitting on this island. I boarded the plane 1 June 2022, and I had a plan. I had a very lucrative government contract. It was running, and I was going to continue that for another year. And then in January of that year, we got caught up in politics. Contract got cancelled. I'm supposed to get on a plane 1 June. So half of my year's income gone, and the year ahead income gone. I had to make a decision, do I still get on the plane? Right. I got on the plane because I had a very clear roadmap of what that future looked like. Not in a reckless way, but in a way that made sense to me. And it only needs to make sense to me. And so this concept of what does retirement, what does investment look like? The traditional worldview is that in order to retire, you need this big pot of money. And once you've got this big pot of money, you draw down from it on a monthly basis. And hopefully it's going to keep you going for 25 years. So if I had that worldview, I wouldn't be sitting here because I don't have a big pot of money. Now, because I've done the deep research on another area which is of interest to me, which is cryptocurrency and Bitcoin specifically, I have a very different worldview. And so when you understand crypto, you understand Bitcoin, you know it works in these cycles, and you know it works in a 4-year cycle. And so if you can sustain a 4-year cycle in crypto, you can at least double up your money every year. Doing, not trading, just putting your money, leaving it there and wait for 4 years. Coin on average of its life has grown at an average of more than 200%. And it's the most conservative cryptocurrency. So if you have a basket of cryptocurrency, you can grow it more than that. But let's say you're going 100%, right? If you're growing at 100% over 4 years, people don't understand exponential growth, but you go from 1 million to 16 million over 4 years. That's just growing 100% every year. 1, 4, 8, 16. So then the thing is, you don't need a big pot of money. You need to sustain yourself for 4 years. And so I look at my lifestyle in South Africa and I say, okay, if I move to a place like Indonesia, I've reduced my cost of living to a third of what it was in South Africa. If I had 1 year runway in South Africa, I've now got 3 years runway in Indonesia. 3 years. And so suddenly you create this desired future because you have this deep understanding of things that impact your desired future. And so that's how you basically keep yourself focused on the future by doing the deep research, then seeing how you connect the dots and then actioning those things while you're still busy with your day-to-day stuff.
Powerful way of seeing things. And what I would like to ask you is, if you, in the process of creating your desired future and to see, like you pursue this simple life, like move to a tropical island and so on, but others might not want that, might want something else. How do you find out what exactly you want? There are certain questions to ask yourself to make sure that the thing that you're working to is not something that will drain you more or will even destroy your health even further. How you arrive at that point? What question do you ask yourself?
So there's various tools we use. I have many tools in the toolbox, right? But the most powerful tool for me is storytelling. It's the most powerful tool once you unlock it. Storytelling, imagination is something that we all had as 4-year-olds. When we were 4-year-olds, we were all astronauts. We were all going to the moon. We were fantastic artists. We were dancers. We were all those things. And then very interestingly, somewhere along the way, someone told you, you can't draw, and you believed it, and you stopped drawing. I just dealt with a client yesterday and she was telling me that when she was younger, she had this wild imagination. But as she progressed, as she studied, as she went to work, it just disappeared. It just she hasn't woken it for ages. And so that's what it's about. It's about unlocking that 4-year-old in us, that person that was this fantastic artist. And that's why the creativity is so important in this exercise that I take people through. It's about giving yourself the right to imagine. And so what happens is, as this 4-year-old, you have this great imagination. And then as you grow up, when you go into the society, then tells you this is the rules for what success looks like. And so then we believe that. And that becomes the measure of success, whether it's the fancy car or the house or whatever. And it's very difficult breaking free from that. And so what you want to do is say, unlock that 4-year-old in you again. And so one of the exercises I tell people is, just take time out. And I'm going to tell you time out 2-3 hours, leave your phone behind, take a pad with a pen and sit in nature somewhere. No phone to distract you. Take in nature and then breathe and think about desired future. You're waking up in your desired future. And when you're waking up, you start writing whatever you see, whatever you feel, whatever you're smelling. So you wake up, what pajamas are you wearing? You get out of bed, what does the room look like? You open up the curtain, what do you see? You walk outside, what do you smell? And you write in as much detail as possible what a day in your life looks like in this desired future. You just download it, just write. And it's hard, it's very hard. So yeah, you put yourself in nature with your writing pad and you look into the distant future and you're waking up in your desired future. And when you're waking up, it's down to what pajamas are you wearing? What does your room look like? You open your curtain, you look outside, what does it look like? You walk outside, what do you see, what do you smell? And you just write down all these things in as much detail as possible. You capture your whole day in this essay that you're going to write. And then you close it and you leave it. And you come back to it in a day or two's time. And then you go through and you read what you've written. And when you read what you've written, there's normally things that jump out at you. It's like, what? Did I say that? Did I really write this? Because those things that jump out at you are the things that's special. And those things are the things that then form your massive transformative purpose. And so people who have done it and spend the time, when they go and read it, they come back and tell me, I can't believe I wrote this. This is what I wrote. Right? And so that's one of the tools. The other, when I end off this first session with people, I normally say, tell me 3 things that will make you extremely happy this week. And they'll come up with 3 things, whatever that is. And then I say, okay, cool. Now let's go into the distant future. Don't want to sound morbid, but you're on your deathbed and you're thinking about what are the 3 things that brings you extreme happiness. And then people have to think about that a bit. And then they say what those 3 things are. And certain people are the 3 things that this week is caught up sometimes with work or, just immediate chase. And then I tell them your MTP obviously lies closer to your second three things. And so you need to build your MTP around those three things that on your deathbed you think about and say, these things brought me extreme happiness. And we can kid ourselves into believing that this seems far-fetched or that I need to achieve this or achieve that, whatever it is. Your inner soul knows what it is that brings you happiness, what brings you contentment. Nothing wrong with having a corporate job and guys work extreme hours on those. And if that makes you happy, that's cool. I just don't know anyone on their deathbed that says, I wish I spent more time at the office. It just doesn't happen, right? And so this concept of future is coming towards us. And so in future studies, it's about saying you're not a victim to the future. It's not about the future coming towards us. It's about saying I can be part of creating my desired future. And in order to do that, I need to start thinking deeply about that desired future. I need to do the research on the things that can disrupt that future and then have a clear plan of actions that I need to take immediately that can move me towards that future.
That's something that a lot of us should do. I think when we unleash our creativity, and especially through something that we are doing with our body, like handwriting, it's such a powerful tool because we often end up in the situation that we write all day on our keyboards, devices, and we are not deep connected with a piece of paper. I started journaling a couple of months ago, and just by putting some words on a paper, it was so different in my perception of reality comparing to just writing on a computer. It's something else. And I think another powerful thing that is happening there when you start writing your ideas down and thinking creatively about the future. Here, this concept of be present, live in the present moment, don't think too much about the future or the past. But that's kind of wrong because if we don't learn from the mistakes of the past and if you cannot imagine the future, what's the point? Like, it's of course important to be present, to live in the present moment, to not, I don't know, have these activities with your loved ones or something and your mind wanders. That's wrong. But if you spend time with yourself, like you mentioned, to actually envision how or what you want to achieve, that's powerful. And when you end yourself through this exercise and you eventually decide to live a simple life, comparing to your past life, what were the challenges to overcome that successful executive corporate lifestyle, living in South Africa and completely change everything? I've been to Lombok and I know the lifestyle there. It's so much slow paced, surrounded by nature, totally different food scene, totally different environment. How challenging was to move to that?
The move here was seamless and our integration into this community has been seamless. Now, whether that's from a religious perspective, because it's a Muslim island, whether it's because our forefathers come from Indonesia and ended up in South Africa, but I really feel at home here. But I think it's a vastly different world to the world that I was living before. And this island is not for everyone. You've been here, right? You've seen it. There's no fancy cars and no fancy designer shops and none of those things. You know, the biggest car you're going to find here is a Toyota Fortuner with the black windows, right? And so this concept of, firstly, for me, what was quite nice was this thing of unplugging from the advertising machinery. And so when you live in these big cities, you're just bombarded with this thing. You don't realize that it's just subconscious, but you're just bombarded with it. It's just not part of life, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is we live about 20 minutes out of Matram, which is the main town. And you've seen the villages, right? And so people in the village live very basic life. And when I say basic, furniture in the house, basic sort of thing. And it gives you a new appreciation for this concept of simple living, a very new perspective to it. And so you move in circles where there is no expectations on things, whether it's your own perception of expectations or real expectations. There are none here with regard to what car you're driving, what clothes you're wearing, what it just doesn't exist. And so that is quite refreshing. And then I think another thing is, as you mentioned, you're just so in touch with nature, yeah. And when I stayed in Cape Town, beautiful city, weekends we were always out in nature somewhere, either on the beach or in the mountain. Every day I'm in nature. You're surrounded by it constant. I still have to pinch myself every day. It's like, am I really living this life? And this thing of connecting to nature is just so phenomenal, Even though I spent a lot of time in nature in Cape Town, yeah, it's at a different level. You start becoming familiar with insects and stuff, which you just never knew in your previous lives. So there's that aspect as well. And you come to this place and you have skill sets that you want to continue using. And you've heard the story of the fisherman and the businessman, right? Where the businessman finds the fisherman on the beach and goes on this whole thing about how he can work harder and grow a fishing empire. And the fisherman asks him why. And it eventually ends up so that then you can go sit on the beach and relax. And he's like, but I'm doing that right now. I don't need to grow this empire to do that. And so that was a wonderful story. And, you hear all these wonderful stories, but are we brave enough to actually live them? Because when I came to Lombok, I actually met that fisherman. I met a businessman who came here to Lombok, had that same mindset, and I had this whole plan of taking this person's piece of land and on the beach and building something fantastic, and had the architect there, everything. And at the end of the day, the wife just said, no, why you want to do this to us? He couldn't understand. And at the day they were supposed to sign, the wife said, no, we're not signing this. This is going to change our lives completely. We spend all our meals sitting around the table eating. Husband sits on the beach in the morning watching the children play in the sunrise. This world that you're explaining to us of fancy house and TVs and computers, and I don't think we want that. So he was quite upset when he left that meeting. But that morning, he says he drove to the jetty to catch the ferry, and he drove past the spot where the guy was sitting, and the sun was coming up, and the fisherman was sitting on the beach. His children were playing there, and he looked and he realized, this is it, right? This is it. He's now moved to the island and stays here. And so that was the challenge for me, because when I came here, everything I look at through a business lens, through a scaling lens, how to make this thing better, how to make it bigger. And I needed to actively tell myself, no, it doesn't need to be better. It doesn't need to be bigger. You can help people by making their lives easier, but you don't need to scale it into something huge for them to live a better life. Their better life is knowing that they've got food for the week. And our Western mindset that we grew up with, from business perspective of just taking everything and scaling because bigger is better, I think I've learned that's not always the case. And definitely on an island like Lombok, which is suffering because of the earthquake, because of COVID lockdown, as you've seen yourself, struggling to get tourists here. But in this world between this modernity and tradition, it's a very interesting space and place to be in right now, and specifically for the journey that I'm on. And so right now I can see myself staying here for a while and just being part of this world. And you can impact people's lives here with the skill sets that you have in ways which are phenomenal. It doesn't take money, it doesn't take a lot of stuff, but you can dramatically impact people's lives because of the skill sets that you bring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the powerful thing about moving to a new place. Because you meet all these people living a different lifestyle, living a simple life, and you realize that you don't need a lot of things to be happy. You don't need a lot of things to feel fulfilled or to enjoy every single day. And when you bring in the skill set that you mentioned and you share that, maybe you can improve their lives in a different way, but still without impacting their way of living. And I think that's powerful. And speaking of skill set and tools, resources, what would be your recommendations for those listening to look into in order to try to build this for themselves?
Yeah, so it's an actual field you can study, and I studied it at Bosch University in South Africa. It's a top futures schools and been around for a very long time. And there's governments that have embraced future studies. Singapore is one of those and have been very successful with that. But then countries like China have been playing with futures for a long time. And when they play with futures, they talk 200 years into the future. And it's at another level. And you look at the Chinese civilization and how they operate. And so future studies becomes a very interesting field. And yeah, I've advised a lot of people that I mentor, when they ask what can they go study further, they want to do a postgrad degree, MBA. I say, well, I just don't recommend the MBA anymore because the world has changed so dramatically. Unless you really want to go into corporate, and that's fine. I recommend you people go do a future studies course, because as an engineer, when I did future studies, it just opened my mind to a whole new world.
Yeah, I bet. And if people want to connect and work with you, how they can reach out, where they can find you?
So LinkedIn is the best place to find me at the moment. I've got a website as well, Living Light Journey. You can get me on my website. That's where people can find me.
Awesome. And I'll put the link as well in the show notes. And to wrap things up, we have a tradition in this show for our guests to give a challenge to those listening, a short one that they can complete in less than 24 hours. And the challenge I was thinking of is to tell them what they can do in less than one day in order to pursue a simple life.
So again, I think for me, this concept of understanding that future is not something that's imposed on us. We can be part of creating a desired future. We don't have to be a victim to the future. So it's a mind shift change. And it starts with that 50-30-20 rule. Take 20% of your time to think deeply about your distant future, 10, 15, 20 years into the future. Allocate that time. Find the time. You can find the time. If you're not spending that time thinking about the future, you get disrupted. And that's how large organizations get disrupted, when they're not thinking deeply about the distant future. And so in your personal life, I would recommend people to do that, challenge them to do that. Take 20% of your time, think deeply about the future.
That's powerful. And I'm certain that I will do that challenge because I often spend all my time on the day-to-day tasks, on the day-to-day course, and I don't think about how my life will be. And as you mentioned, like 10, 15 years, it's a long time. And we often don't think that much. We think about the next few months or 1 year, but never into the future. So thank you so much for sharing that, Abbas. This was an awesome conversation. And personally, I grasped so many golden nuggets there that I know that I will try to apply and hopefully I will succeed.
Fantastic. Looking forward to seeing you in the future.
Me too. Thank you so much again for joining the show. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to subscribe to your favorite podcast station to not miss when we drop the next one. We have lots of exciting guests and surprises for you coming up. This is your host, Gabe Marushka, with the Nomad Solopreneur Show. Until next week, pura vida!